Alright, welcome back to uh, part B of the part 2 of the presentation, where we are going to be focusing on starting out the game and getting into seeing the game actually come together. Starting the game. So when the game first loads up, you'll see the first image that you see below the two bullet points where it says player 1 information, player 2 information, and that start game um, button there, or yes, button. And the code on the on your left here actually takes whichever name they put in the name boxes there and stores those values um, into the object and into the display of where player one, player two, and the buttons are. And when the start game, when the start game is pressed, then it triggers this game begins method here function, and then we're able to switch from getting information to actually showing you the chips remaining, whose turn is it, and the actual buttons that are at the bottom as well. And then to make sure that we don't allow people to start pressing keys and try to figure out how to play the game without actually starting the game, um, we wait to add the actual listener that's listening for the button interaction of pressing the actual keys there at the very bottom. Once that's triggered, then the game is ready to go and be played. Now that we have the game in motion, the first option is to actually use the keys on your keyboard, which um, some people might find it easy if you're on the desktop and you have the buttons there. You can press them pretty easily on the laptop. I found out it is a little bit more tedious with the smaller buttons and such. Um, but here, for while it's listening, for the web page to be listening for whatever keys you're pressing on the keyboard, um, every key has a number assigned to it. And that's where the key code comes in on these if statements where they're checking for key code number 37 that's saying, at least in our code here, we want to move it to the left by one column. If we want to go to the right, it's going to trigger the key number 39. And when we want to drop the chip to go to drop the chip in the game, in the move, we hit 40. Um, as we are pressing the left and right buttons, we are restoring the current position into the top row and making sure that we update that top row, and then whichever value it was at before updates, make sure that we don't have multiple chips in there at the top and wondering which one is my chip. And when you press down and it switches to the next player, to make sure that the players were that it doesn't create a second chip, we actually have to assign the previous um, player's turn, like where they dropped their chip, and thread it into the next player's um, chip position, so that we can keep the same chip up top and then have 4 or 5 various chips being created, and then adds to confusion. All right, and this code here is only shown for player 1, but it's the exact same code for player 2. just flipping the player A to player B and then storing which one's which there. Moving using the mouse. Now, the green buttons at the very bottom, where the start button was, it's at the very top right of your screen. Those buttons are they are able to represent the exact same functionality as your keys on the keyboard. This you can use your mouse instead of kind of to mess with the actual keys on your keyboard. To keep the logic the same with the numbers of 37, 39, 40, I was able to manipulate the code just so that just checking for those numbers, and when we click left, we're moving to the left, and when we pass in that 37, the 39 to move right, and that um, the drop is 40, and we just keep everything in that portion the same. And to take a turn, you were pressing the down arrow key on both. Um, the reason why is I thought that was a little easier than pressing enter on the keyboard. I thought that was a little bit less clunky. It's like you keep all your hands in the right in one spot rather than trying to move move here. You see his arrow keys left and right, and then click the button on the screen to drop your chip. I thought it was a little easier that way. Um, Now for take turn, um, we are passing in the which column are they is the current player in. Then we are able to use that number, say, okay, we want to drop in the fourth column, which is the middle row down the middle, and we wanted to see if, okay, is there any chips that are already in that column. That goes to column count. Um, and we're able to say, okay, we need that number. Let's store that in row, so we have a row now of how far down does the chip need to go? Because since the chips in the actual game actually drop to the bottom, we then are able to um, update using the row in position, the column in row, and able to say, okay, that's for player one, and store it there. Decrement, okay, this is basically we're able to subtract. We need to subtract one because there's one chip in that column now, so we can move it up instead of adding one or something like that you might think. But since we're trying to move the chips from the bottom up, we want to subtract one. And we need to update who's playing currently after the turn's been played. And we need to take a chip off the number of chips so that we can keep track of how many moves have been played and so forth. Um, Now, the big if statement at the very bottom, this is being run every time we drop a chip because at any point you can get 5 in a row. Um, it just depends on um, which, um, you know, who gets it first, and it's based on that turn. So we're doing the bait. Their checking is all on the last move played, rather than scanning just through the whole grid every time. This is a little, this is where the fun begins for our next um, talk or Annette's clip here. Stay tuned.